30 years ago, a dying man made me a promise that would destroy his son's world. Today, that promise comes due. I'm standing here in front of the Harper Mansion on October 21st, 2025, exactly 3 decades since the day William Harper placed a sealed envelope in my trembling hands and whispered words that would echo through every moment of my life since then. Be patient, Clara. Justice is worth the wait. For 30 years, I've carried those words like a lifeline through storms of humiliation, waves of exploitation, and oceans of doubt. I've watched his son Richard transform this house of love into a palace of cruelty. I've endured microaggressions that cut deeper than any blade, racial slurs disguised as jokes, and systematic abuse that would have broken most people. But I didn't break. I couldn't, because I made a promise to a good man, and today, that promise explodes into the light. Please support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. My name is Clara Thompson, and I'm 55 years old now, though some days I feel ancient beyond counting. I came to this house 30 years ago when I was just 25, fresh out of nursing school with a degree from Howard University, and dreams bigger than the sky. I wasn't looking for a family when I answered that advertisement for a private nurse, but that's exactly what I found. William Harper was 72 then, diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, given maybe a year to live if he was lucky. His wife Margaret had passed 2 years prior, and his son Richard was too busy climbing corporate ladders to notice his father slipping away. I was hired to provide medical care, to manage medications and monitor vital signs to ensure comfort in those final months. What I didn't expect was to find a man who saw me not as the help, but as a human being worthy of respect, conversation, and genuine affection. William had fought in Korea, built a real estate empire from nothing, raised a son who disappointed him in ways he couldn't articulate without pain clouding his eyes. He told me stories about growing up poor in Alabama, about witnessing injustice that shaped his values, about building wealth not for accumulation but for legacy. He asked about my dreams, my struggles as a single mother trying to build a life for my daughter Sarah. He listened when I spoke, really listened, like my words carried weight in the universe. And slowly, over months of shared meals and late-night conversations and quiet moments watching old films together, we became family in the truest sense of the word. Richard Harper Jr. is 58 years old, 6 feet tall, with silver hair that he keeps precisely trimmed, and suits that cost more than most people earn in a month. He's a successful real estate developer. When his father was alive, Richard visited maybe once a month, always checking his watch, always taking phone calls in the middle of conversations, always leaving early with vague promises to return soon. After William died, Richard's true nature emerged like a monster from deep water. He kept me on, not out of kindness but convenience. Free labor, he calculated. A woman too loyal to leave, too financially dependent to fight back, too conditioned by 30 years of service to imagine alternatives. He stopped paying me the modest salary his father had insisted on. He treated me like furniture, something to be used and ignored in equal measure. Know your place, Clara. That became his favorite phrase, delivered with a smile that never reached his cold blue eyes. His wife Jennifer was worse in some ways, all passive-aggressive comments about how lucky I was to live in such a beautiful home, how grateful I should be for their generosity. The microaggressions were constant and calculated. They'd discuss me in third person while I stood in the room. They'd compliment my cooking with shocked surprise, as if excellence from a black woman defied their expectations. They'd ask me to serve their dinner parties, to wear a uniform, to play the role they'd assigned me in their carefully constructed narrative of superiority. 30 years ago, in a bedroom on the 3rd floor of this mansion, William Harper called me to his bedside on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The hospice nurse had just left, and autumn light filtered through lace curtains, casting patterns on his weathered face. He'd been sleeping more lately, eating less, slipping away by degrees that broke my heart with each passing day. But that afternoon his eyes were clear and focused, burning with purpose I hadn't seen in weeks. "Clara, sit down. I need to tell you something important." His voice was weak but steady, each word chosen with care. "I've watched you these 5 years. I've seen how you care for me, how you sacrifice for your daughter, how you navigate a world that doesn't appreciate your worth. You've given me more love and dignity in my dying than my own son has provided in his entire life. Richard is my blood, but you are my heart." He paused, struggling for breath, and I reached for his hand. He squeezed back with surprising strength. "I've made arrangements, legal arrangements that Richard doesn't know about. When the time comes, 30 years from now, everything will be revealed, but you must promise me you'll wait. You must endure whatever comes with patience and faith. Can you do that for me?" I was crying, confused, overwhelmed by the intensity in his eyes. "I promise," I whispered. "Whatever you need, I promise." He smiled then, peaceful and satisfied, and handed me a sealed envelope with instructions written in his shaking handwriting on the front. That envelope has lived in a safety deposit box for 30 years, untouched, except for the times I've gone to look at it during my darkest moments, to remind myself that endurance has purpose. William died 6 days after that conversation, peacefully in his sleep with my hand in his. The funeral was enormous, hundreds of people Richard barely knew, making speeches about a man they'd never understood. I sat in the back, invisible in my grief, while Richard played the devoted son with Oscar-worthy performance. The will reading was straightforward, everything to Richard as expected, with a modest trust for maintaining the property and a stipulation that I could remain in the staff quarters as long as I wished. Richard was relieved. No complications, no surprises, just clean inheritance of a fortune worth millions even then. What he didn't know was that his father had visited a different lawyer, one Richard had never met, and created a second will with instructions so specific and binding that no court could overturn them. My daughter Sarah was only 8 months old then, and I held her during William's funeral, whispering promises about patience and justice and better days ahead. She's 30 now, a lawyer herself, brilliant and fierce. She's 30 now, a lawyer herself, brilliant and fierce, and so tired of watching her mother be diminished. She doesn't understand why I stay. How could she? I've never told her about the envelope, about the promise, about the plan William set in motion 3 decades ago. Sarah calls me every day, her voice tight with frustration and love in equal measure. "Mom, you have to leave. You have to stop letting them treat you like this." She's a civil rights attorney specializing in employment discrimination cases. My situation makes her professional blood boil. Just last week she came over with documentation, evidence of labor law violations going back years, a case so solid any judge would rule in my favor within minutes. "We could sue him into the ground, Mom. We could take everything he has." But I shake my head, the same way I've shaken it for 30 years, and tell her to trust me, to be patient just a little longer. She thinks I'm broken, conditioned by decades of abuse into some kind of Stockholm syndrome. She doesn't see the steel in my spine, the fire I've banked but never extinguished, the absolute certainty that justice delayed is not justice denied. Tomorrow is October 21st, 2025. Tomorrow morning I'll open that envelope for the first time in 30 years. Tomorrow I'll walk into Richard Harper's office and detonate the truth bomb his father planted like a time-delayed revolution. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tonight I'm sitting in my small room on the 3rd floor, the same room where William died, and I'm ready. I'm so incredibly ready. The morning meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. in Richard's mahogany-paneled office, the room where he makes million-dollar deals and destroys people's lives with equal efficiency. I'm wiping down the conference table when he walks in with Jennifer, both dressed like they're attending a victory celebration rather than a business meeting. Richard doesn't even glance at me as he tosses his briefcase onto the chair I just cleaned. "Clara, coffee, black, 2 sugars for Jennifer, and clear out once you're done. We have important matters to discuss." I nod silently, preparing their drinks while they spread architectural renderings across the table. My hands are steady as I pour, though my heart is racing. These are the plans for demolishing this house, for erasing 30 years of William's legacy and my life. The renderings show luxury condominiums, 15 stories of glass and steel where this beautiful mansion now stands. Richard is explaining the numbers to Jennifer, his voice thick with greed. $15 million for the development rights. Another $20 million projected profit within 3 years. will finally be free of this albatross, and Clara will finally be out of our hair. He says my name like it's a curse word. Jennifer laughs, that tinkling sound that sets my teeth on edge. 30 days' notice should be more than generous for someone who's been living here rent-free for 3 decades. Where will she go, though? Richard shrugs. Not our problem. She should have thought about her future instead of playing house with my father. I set their coffee cups down gently, though I want to throw them against the wall, and ask with perfect calm if there's anything else they need. Richard waves me away dismissively. Actually, yes. Pack up my father's study today. Everything goes to storage or trash. Nothing has value except maybe some first editions. I'll have an appraiser come by tomorrow. I pause at the doorway, my back to them, and ask the question I've been waiting 30 years to pose. Did your father ever mention anything about his final wishes to you? About promises he made? Richard's laugh is sharp and cruel. My father was sentimental and senile at the end. Whatever fairy tales he filled your head with, Clara, they were just that. Fairy tales. Now get to work. Sarah arrives an hour later, fury radiating from every pore. She finds me in William's study, carefully removing books from shelves while tears I've held for weeks finally break free. Mom, no. You're not doing this. You're not packing up your life because that racist bastard says so. She grabs my hands, stopping my work, forcing me to look at her. My daughter is 30 years old, brilliant and fierce in her designer suit, with her law degree and her righteous anger. She looks so much like me at that age, before the years wore me down, before I learned to hide my strength behind submission. Baby, I say softly, sometimes we have to bend before we can break through. She's not listening, pulling out her phone to show me documents she's prepared. We have grounds for a lawsuit that would destroy him, Mom. Unpaid wages, going back 15 years, hostile work environment, racial discrimination with at least 7 documented incidents, wrongful termination. I could file this today and have an injunction against the sale by tomorrow. We could take everything he has. Her voice cracks on those last words, and I realize she's not just angry at Richard. She's angry at me for enduring, for accepting, for not fighting back all these years. I pull her into my arms. This daughter I raised on faith and patience, and whisper against her hair that justice comes in many forms. I made a promise to a good man, Sarah. A promise that today, finally, I get to keep. Trust me just a little longer. She pulls back, searching my face with eyes too much like my own. What promise, Mom? What could possibly be worth this? I just smile, secretive and certain, and tell her she'll understand very soon. Tonight, baby. Come back tonight and you'll understand everything. She's not satisfied, but she knows that tone in my voice, the one that means my decision is final, so she leaves with reluctance and continued fury, promising to return at 7 p.m. sharp. Marcus Johnson appears just before noon, unexpected and unwelcome. He's a black man in his mid-40s, Harvard-educated, impeccably dressed, and thoroughly convinced of his own righteousness. Richard hired him 5 years ago as family attorney, and Marcus has proven his worth by managing trusts, handling property transfers. He knocks on the study door where I'm still packing books, his expression a mixture of suspicion and something that might be concern. Miss Thompson, may I have a moment? His formality is deliberate, creating distance between us even as he steps into the room. I gesture to one of William's leather chairs and he sits, uncomfortable in a way that makes me almost smile. Richard has asked me to discuss some matters regarding the property transfer and your imminent departure. However, in reviewing the estate files, I've come across some documentation that raises questions. There's a sealed file dated October 21st, 1995. Instructions that it should be opened today. A secondary will, possibly, though Richard insists no such document exists. Marcus is watching me carefully, looking for tells, for signs of deception or conspiracy. Miss Thompson, if you know anything about this, I need you to tell me now. Withholding information about testamentary documents is a serious matter. I meet his eyes steadily and speak truth wrapped in misdirection. Mr. William Harper was a good man who believed in justice and proper order. If he left instructions to be followed on a specific date, I imagine those instructions should be honored, don't you? Marcus frowns, unsure whether I've confirmed or denied anything. Have you seen this document? Do you know its contents? I shake my head slowly. What I know, Mr. Johnson, is that Mr. William loved his family and wanted the best for everyone. What I believe is that the truth has a way of coming out when the time is right. And what I trust is that today, 30 years after a good man died, his wishes will finally be honored. Marcus stands, frustrated by my non-answers. I'll be contacting the firm that witnessed the original will. If there's something irregular happening here, Miss Thompson, it will come to light. I nod agreement, returning to my book packing. I'm counting on it, Mr. Johnson. I'm counting on exactly that. The afternoon deteriorates into systematic humiliation. Richard brings 3 appraisers through the house, valuing furniture and artwork. One appraiser, an older white man with kind eyes, asks how long I've lived here and seems genuinely shocked when Richard interrupts to say that I'm staff, not family, regardless of how many years I've occupied space in his father's home. The staff comment is deliberate, designed to diminish me in front of witnesses, to establish the narrative he wants the world to believe. Jennifer has invited several friends over for lunch, and they gather in the sunroom while I serve salads and wine, discussing the demolition plans like it's entertainment. One woman, dripping in diamonds, comments how sad it must be for me to lose my home after so long. Before I can respond, Jennifer cuts in with false sympathy. Oh, Clara's resilient. She'll land on her feet. Though at her age, finding new employment might be challenging. The women laugh, understanding the subtext. A 55-year-old black woman with no recent work history beyond household service? Good luck. I serve dessert with steady hands, meeting none of their eyes, playing the role they've assigned me. But inside, I'm counting down hours. 6 more hours until Sarah returns. 6 more hours until I open that envelope. 6 more hours until this entire charade explodes in their faces. Richard dismisses me early, telling me to pack my personal belongings because trash collection is tomorrow and he wants anything I'm not taking hauled away. I climb the stairs to my small 3rd-floor room, the space I've occupied for 30 years, and begin carefully folding clothes, wrapping photographs, preparing for departure. But I'm not packing to leave. I'm packing because tomorrow this will be my house, and I want Richard's poison cleared out before I begin the real work of restoration. Evening comes with the soft gold light that William always loved, the kind of autumn sunset that makes everything look like it's been dipped in honey. I shower and change, not into my usual simple dresses but into the navy blue suit I bought last week, the one that cost a month's saved wages, but makes me look like the professional woman I've always been. I do my makeup carefully, style my gray-touched hair into a neat bun, and put on the pearl earrings that William gave me for my 30th birthday against Richard's protests. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a victim anymore. I see a warrior who's been planning her campaign for 3 decades, and tonight, the battle begins. I go downstairs to find Richard and Jennifer in the living room, celebrating with champagne. They're watching HGTV, some show about house flipping, discussing which designer they'll hire. Neither notices when I enter, so I clear my throat softly. Mr. Harper, I have something to discuss with you. Richard glances up, irritation crossing his face when he sees how I'm dressed. What are you wearing, Clara? Did you forget your station? I smile, calm and cold. I wanted to look appropriate for what's about to happen. I've invited a few people to join us. My attorney will be here shortly, along with some other interested parties. Richard stands abruptly, angry now. Your attorney? Have you lost your mind? You don't get to invite people to my house. I'm calling the police to have you removed right now. He's reaching for his phone when the doorbell rings, and before he can react, I walk to answer it. This is still my home for approximately 1 more minute, I say over my shoulder. After that, we'll discuss whose house it really is. Sarah is at the door, but she's not alone. Behind her stands attorney James Mitchell from Hartford & Associates, a distinguished black man in his 60s carrying a leather briefcase. Next to him is Marcus Johnson, looking conflicted and curious in equal measure. And behind them, to my surprise and satisfaction, is Eleanor Price, my elderly neighbor who's witnessed 30 years of this family's dysfunction. They file into the living room like an army I've been secretly assembling, and Richard's face goes from red to pale in seconds. What the hell is this, Clara? Some kind of shakedown? I'm calling my lawyer right now." Attorney Mitchell speaks before Richard can dial, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years practicing law. "Mr. Harper, I am the attorney who drafted your father's secondary will in 1995. I've been retained by Miss Thompson to ensure its proper execution as of today's date, October 21st, 2025. Perhaps you should sit down. This is going to take some time." Jennifer grabs Richard's arm, whispering urgently. Richard's face contorts through several emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a smug certainty that this must be some kind of con. There is no secondary will. "My father left everything to me. This is fraud, and I will see all of you prosecuted." Marcus steps forward then, and I can see the exact moment his professional integrity overrides his loyalty to Richard's paychecks. "Actually, Richard, I've spent the afternoon researching this matter. The sealed file exists, properly witnessed and notarized. Mr. Mitchell's firm has impeccable credentials. If your father did indeed execute a secondary will, it's legally binding regardless of your knowledge of its existence." Richard turns on Marcus with fury. "You're fired. Get out of my house." Marcus doesn't move. "I don't work for you, Richard. I work for the Harper estate. And until we determine who the rightful beneficiary is, I'm staying exactly where I am." I walk to the center of the room, standing in the space where William used to read the newspaper every morning, and I pull the envelope from my jacket pocket. 30 years old, sealed with red wax, addressed in William's shaking handwriting. "To be opened October 21st, 2025. In the presence of Clara Thompson and Richard Harper Jr., Richard stares at it like it's a bomb, which in many ways it is. Attorney Mitchell breaks the seal with formal precision, removing several documents and a USB drive. He begins reading in a clear, measured voice that fills the room with William's final wishes. "I, William James Harper, being of sound mind and body on this 21st day of October, 1995, do hereby execute this secondary testamentary document to be enacted precisely 30 years from this date." Richard interrupts, shouting now, "This is insane. You can't enforce a will with a time delay like that. It's not legal." Mitchell doesn't even look up. "Actually, Mr. Harper, time-delayed trusts and conditional bequests are perfectly legal when properly structured. Your father worked with 3 attorneys to ensure this document would be unassailable. Now, if you'll allow me to continue." He reads on, and with each word, Richard's face loses more color. "The mansion at 123 Oakwood Drive, valued at $3.2 million at current assessment, is hereby bequeathed in its entirety to Clara Marie Thompson. The trust fund of $500,000, maintained separately from the estate, is also bequeathed to Clara Marie Thompson. All furnishings, artwork, and personal effects within the home are included in this bequest." The silence that follows is absolute. Jennifer makes a small choking sound. Marcus's eyes go wide with professional shock. Eleanor smiles like she's been waiting 30 years to witness this moment, which she probably has. Sarah grabs my hand, squeezing so hard it hurts, tears already streaming down her face. And Richard just stares, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "That's not possible," he finally whispers. "That's not possible. This house is worth millions. She's nobody. She's just the nurse, just the help." Attorney Mitchell pulls out the USB drive. "Your father anticipated your reaction, Mr. Harper. He left several recordings explaining his reasoning. Would you like to hear them, or shall I simply proceed with the transfer of deed?" Richard lunges for the USB drive, but Marcus blocks him with surprising physicality. "Richard, don't. This is already bad enough without you making it worse." Richard rounds on him with venom. "Bad enough? This is theft. This is a con job. That woman manipulated a sick old man into signing away his son's inheritance. I'm contesting this will, and I will win." Sarah steps forward then, and I've never been more proud of my daughter than in this moment when she becomes my champion. "You'll lose, Mr. Harper. I've reviewed the documentation. Your father used 3 separate attorneys, a notary, and 2 independent witnesses unconnected to either party. He had full mental capacity verified by his physician, and perhaps most importantly, he recorded extensive video testimony explaining exactly why he made this decision. Would you like me to explain the legal standard for testamentary capacity? Because I specialize in estate law, and I promise you have no grounds for challenge. Richard looks at her like he's seeing her for the first time. Who the hell are you? Clara Thompson, attorney at law, Clara's daughter. And as of now, your legal adversary if you choose to contest. She's calm, professional, devastating, everything I've raised her to be, and more. Mitchell inserts the USB into Richard's expensive sound system without asking permission, and suddenly, William's voice fills the room, weak but clear, recorded in those final weeks before his death. My son Richard has been given every advantage in life: education, wealth, connections, opportunity. And with all of that, he has become a man who values money over humanity, status over kindness, power over love. Clara Thompson came into my home with nothing but skill and compassion. She has cared for me with a tenderness my own son never showed. She has sacrificed her own advancement to ensure my comfort. She has loved me not for what I own but for who I am. In the years she's worked here, I've watched her raise a daughter on a nurse's salary, navigate a world designed to diminish her, and maintain her dignity through circumstances that would have destroyed lesser people. The recording continues, William's voice growing stronger with conviction despite his physical weakness. I'm leaving Clara this house because she has made it a home. I'm leaving her financial security because she deserves to live her final decades without the fear of poverty that's haunted her entire life. And I'm requiring this 30-year delay because I hope, perhaps foolishly, that Richard will learn something in that time, that he'll grow, that he'll develop the capacity for gratitude and respect that he currently lacks. If, after 30 years of watching Clara's continued service, he still cannot see her value, then he has learned nothing and deserves nothing from me beyond what the law requires. There's a pause, the sound of William catching his breath, and then his final words on the recording shatter what's left of Richard's composure. Richard, if you're hearing this, I hope you've treated Clara with the respect she deserves. I hope you've paid her fairly and honored her contribution to this family. I hope you've become the man I always wished you would be. But if you haven't, if you've exploited her loyalty and diminished her humanity, then you're about to learn a very expensive lesson about the consequences of cruelty. The recording ends. Richard stands frozen, and I can see him calculating, remembering, realizing exactly how thoroughly he's failed his father's test. Every unpaid wage, every racial slur, every moment of exploitation and abuse. All of it witnessed, all of it remembered, all of it about to cost him everything. Jennifer breaks the silence with a shriek. This is ridiculous. We'll contest this. We'll tie it up in court for years. You'll never see a penny, you conniving bitch. She's advancing on me when Eleanor Price steps between us, this 80-year-old white woman with more courage than Jennifer will ever possess. Don't you dare speak to Clara that way. I've been watching this family for 30 years and I've seen everything. How Clara cared for William like he was her own father. How she stayed after he died even though she owed nothing to anyone. How you and Richard have treated her like property instead of a person. If you want witnesses to her character versus yours, I'll be first in line. Attorney Mitchell clears his throat, returning attention to legal matters. Miss Thompson, the deed transfer has been prepared pending your signature and the resolution of any outstanding claims against the property. Richard's face goes from pale to gray. Outstanding claims? What outstanding claims? Sarah opens her briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. Well, Mr. Harper, there's the matter of unpaid wages going back 15 years. Minimum wage plus overtime for the hours Clara has actually worked comes to approximately $240,000. Then there's the hostile work environment claim, the racial discrimination documented by 7 separate witnesses, and the wrongful termination which, given the circumstances, could be considered retaliatory and therefore subject to additional penalties. We've also documented the theft of personal property. You accused Clara of stealing your mother's jewelry, when in fact those items were gifts properly documented in your mother's personal correspondence, which we have. That's defamation of character. Shall I continue? Marcus is looking at Richard with dawning horror, understanding finally how thoroughly his client has destroyed himself. Richard, is this true? Did you not pay her? Richard's voice is small now, defensive. She had room and board. That was compensation. Sarah laughs, sharp and humorless. Room and board in a property she didn't know she would inherit? For work performed at your direction, without contract or agreement? That's not compensation, Mr. Harper. That's exploitation. And under federal labor law, it's also illegal. We could add criminal charges to the civil suit if you'd like. Marcus puts his head in his hands. Richard, stop talking. Do not say another word. We need private counsel immediately. But Richard is spiraling now, panic overriding judgment. This is a setup. You planned this. All of it. How long have you been plotting to steal my inheritance, Clara? How long have you been playing the victim while scheming to take everything my father built? I speak for the first time since Attorney Mitchell arrived. My voice is steady as stone. I've been waiting 30 years for justice, Mr. Harper. Your father gave me a gift, yes, but he also gave me a burden. He asked me to endure, to be patient, to wait for this exact moment when the truth would finally matter. Every insult you've thrown at me, every wage you've stolen, every moment of humiliation, I've documented and endured because I made a promise to a man who saw my worth when you saw only a servant. You asked how long I've been planning this, since the day your father died, and you proved him right about everything. Marcus looks at me with something approaching respect mixed with professional alarm. Miss Thompson, given the multiple claims involved here, I need to advise Richard about settlement options. If you're willing to negotiate, we might avoid litigation that would be costly and public for all parties. Sarah shakes her head before I can respond. This isn't about money, Mr. Johnson. This is about justice and accountability. But my mother is more merciful than I would be in her position. She has a proposal. I nod, stepping forward to face Richard directly for the first time in 30 years. Here's what's going to happen, Richard. You're going to accept the will and transfer the deed without contest. In exchange, I won't pursue the wage theft claims or the discrimination suit. You're going to issue a public apology for your treatment of me, acknowledging your behavior and committing to do better. You're going to establish a scholarship fund in your father's name, $100,000, for healthcare workers of color pursuing advanced degrees. And you're going to participate in mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for the next year. Richard's laugh is bitter, broken. And if I refuse, then Sarah files everything tomorrow and we see you in court. With your finances, your reputation, and your business prospects as collateral damage. Your choice. Jennifer grabs Richard's arm. Don't let them blackmail you. Fight this. But Richard is looking at the architectural renderings still spread on the conference table, seeing $15 million evaporating, seeing his reputation destroyed, seeing the future he planned crumbling into dust. And for the first time in the 30 years I've known him, I see something that might be genuine emotion cross his face. Acceptance, maybe. Or just exhaustion. He sinks into his father's favorite chair and puts his face in his hands. Fine. I'll sign whatever you want. Just get out of my sight. Attorney Mitchell produces documents with remarkable efficiency. Actually, Mr. Harper, as of the deed transfer, this is no longer your site to control. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings from the premises. After that, Miss Thompson can have anything remaining disposed of as she sees fit. The role reversal is so complete, so absolute, that even I'm momentarily stunned by it. An hour later, Richard and Jennifer are gone, fled to their downtown condo with whatever dignity they could salvage. Marcus remains, professionally fascinated by the whole affair, asking detailed questions about the trust structure and the delayed bequest mechanics. Attorney Mitchell is patient with him, explaining the legal intricacies, while I sign document after document, making me the legal owner of a $3.2 million property. Eleanor has made tea in what is now my kitchen, and she brings me a cup with a smile that says she's been waiting 3 decades for this moment. Clara, honey, I've watched you suffer in silence for so long. This is the sweetest justice I've ever witnessed. Sarah is crying and laughing at the same time, hugging me so tightly I can barely breathe. Mom, I can't believe you kept this secret. I can't believe you endured all of that when you knew this was coming. Why didn't you tell me? I stroke her hair like she's 8 years old again instead of 30. Because some battles you have to fight alone, baby. Because your anger would have tipped our hand, because William asked me to be patient. And patience was the only weapon I had. She pulls back, studying my face with new understanding. You're the strongest person I've ever known. I shake my head. I'm just a woman who kept a promise. And who believed that justice, even delayed, is worth waiting for. The house feels different now, lighter somehow, as if William's ghost has finally been laid to rest. I walk through rooms that are legally mine, touching furniture I've dusted for 30 years, looking at artwork I've admired but never owned. Tomorrow I'll begin the real work. Tomorrow I'll start transforming this mansion of memory and pain into something new. But tonight, I just stand in the living room where it all happened, where Richard's world exploded and my new life began, and I allow myself to feel everything I've suppressed for 3 decades. Relief, triumph, grief for the years I sacrificed, joy for the future I've finally secured. And underneath it all, profound gratitude to William Harper for seeing me, really seeing me, when everyone else looked right through. The next morning arrives with crystalline clarity, the kind of autumn day that feels like destiny has perfect timing. I'm awake before sunrise, too energized to sleep, too aware that today marks the true beginning of everything. Sarah stayed overnight, and we sit together in the kitchen that is now legally mine, drinking coffee and watching the sky turn from indigo to gold. She's reviewing legal documents, making notes on her laptop, preparing for every possible contingency Richard might attempt, but I'm calm in a way I haven't been in 3 decades. The waiting is over, the promise is fulfilled. Now comes the work of transformation. Around 7 a.m., Marcus Johnson arrives unexpectedly, looking like he hasn't slept. Clara, I need to speak with you privately. Sarah starts to object, protective as always, but I nod permission and lead Marcus into William's study. He sits heavily in the chair where William used to read, and I can see the weight of professional crisis on his shoulders. I've spent the entire night reviewing the Harper estate files. Every transaction, every contract, every legal document I've handled for Richard over the past 5 years, and I'm realizing now how much I missed, how many red flags I ignored, because I trusted my client's word over my own investigation. He meets my eyes with something approaching shame. You endured systemic exploitation and I was complicit through my negligence. I should have questioned the arrangement. I should have demanded proper employment contracts and wage documentation. I failed you as an officer of the court, and I'm deeply sorry. I study him for a long moment, this black man who climbed his way to Harvard and partnership in a prestigious firm, who maybe got comfortable enough in his success to stop seeing certain injustices. Then I nod, accepting what he offers. You can make it right now, Mr. Johnson. Help me transform this house into something that serves the community. Help me create systems that prevent what happened to me from happening to others. Will you do that? He straightens, and I see purpose replacing guilt. Yes, absolutely yes. I'll work pro bono for as long as you need. It's the least I can do. And Clara, please call me Marcus. We're going to be working together for a long time. By 10 a.m., word has spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Eleanor Price has apparently been making phone calls since dawn, and now my living room is filling with people I've known for 30 years, but who never quite saw me until yesterday. Neighbors who smiled politely while I served at their parties. Community leaders who knew William but never acknowledged my role in his final years. And now they're here, curious and congratulatory in equal measure, wanting to be part of the story now that it's dramatic and newsworthy. But there's one person whose arrival changes the entire energy in the room. Catherine Morrison sweeps in like she owns the space, a black woman in her 70s, impeccably dressed, radiating authority that makes everyone stand a little straighter. She's a legend in this community, a retired federal judge, civil rights activist, and the kind of woman who doesn't suffer fools or injustice. I've admired her from afar for years, but we've never formally met. She walks directly to me, ignoring everyone else, and takes both my hands in hers. Clara Thompson, I've been hearing about you for 3 decades from William Harper. He used to call me every few months to talk about you, about your strength, your dignity, your sacrifice. He wanted me to know that when this day came, you'd need support, from people who understand what you've endured. I'm here to provide that support in any way you need. I'm momentarily speechless, tears threatening again. You knew? All this time you knew about the will? She shakes her head. Not the specifics. William was too careful for that. But I knew he had plans to ensure justice for you. And I knew that when those plans came to fruition, there would be people who'd try to diminish what you've accomplished. People who'd call you opportunistic, or manipulative, or worse. I'm here to make sure that narrative doesn't take hold. She turns to address the room, her voice carrying judicial authority. What happened in this house yesterday wasn't a con or a scheme. It was justice delayed, but not denied. It was a good man recognizing worth that our society systematically devalues, and it was a woman honoring a promise through 3 decades of exploitation because she has more integrity than most of us will ever achieve. If anyone in this community has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. The room goes silent, and I see several people nodding, shamefaced. Eleanor steps forward then, adding her voice. I've lived next door for 40 years. I watched Clara care for William like family. I watched Richard treat her like property. And I've watched this entire neighborhood benefit from her invisible labor at events and fundraisers while never once acknowledging her contribution. Judge Morrison is right. This is justice, and it's about time. The afternoon brings unexpected complications. Richard's attorney, not Marcus but a corporate lawyer named Preston Webb, arrives with a team of 3 associates and enough legal firepower to intimidate most people. Webb is everything I've learned to despise about the legal system. A white man in his 60s who sees laws as weapons rather than protections. He demands entry, which Sarah politely denies until he produces a temporary restraining order against the property transfer, claiming fraud and undue influence. Sarah's face goes hard as stone as she reviews the document. This is harassment. Your client signed the settlement agreement less than 24 hours ago. Webb smiles, oily and confident, under duress. He's reconsidered and is prepared to fight this matter to the Supreme Court if necessary. The mansion stays in escrow pending full investigation of the circumstances surrounding the secondary will. Judge Morrison appears at my shoulder like an avenging angel. Preston, you duplicitous snake. I sat on the bench when you were still defending parking tickets. You know as well as I do that a settlement signed before witnesses with legal counsel present isn't voidable just because your client had buyer's remorse. Webb's confidence falters slightly. Your Honor, with all due respect, you're retired and have no jurisdiction here. Catherine laughs, sharp and humorless. No, but I have a phone with direct lines to every sitting judge in this county, and I promise you not one of them will appreciate you wasting court resources on a frivolous motion. Do you really want to stake your reputation on defending a racist who exploited his father's caregiver for 30 years? That story plays differently in the media than you think. Webb's team is exchanging glances now, clearly uncomfortable. Marcus steps forward, having returned from a morning court appearance still in his suit. Mr. Webb, I was family counsel for the Harper estate until yesterday. I can provide documentation proving the secondary will's authenticity, William Harper's mental capacity, and Richard's acknowledgement of its validity. Your motion will be denied before lunch, and you'll have wasted your client's money and your firm's credibility. Your call. The standoff lasts maybe 30 seconds before Webb's lead associate whispers something urgent in his ear. Webb's expression shifts from confident to calculating to resigned. We'll be withdrawing the motion. But this isn't over. Richard Harper has rights, and we'll be exploring all legal avenues. Judge Morrison smiles sweetly. You do that, Preston, and when you lose spectacularly, try to remember that justice doesn't care about your billable hours. Evening brings the moment I've been both anticipating and dreading. Richard himself appears at the door, alone this time, looking nothing like the arrogant man who ordered me around yesterday. He's disheveled, unshaven. Wearing yesterday's clothes like he slept in them, Jennifer left him apparently, took half their liquid assets, and filed for divorce before the ink dried on the settlement. His business partners are distancing themselves. The real estate deal collapsed with financial penalties he can't afford. In less than 48 hours, his entire life has imploded. Can we talk, please? His voice is broken, humble in a way I've never heard. I should say no. I should close the door and let him suffer without witness or comfort. But William raised me better than that, so I step aside and let him enter the home that used to be his. We sit in the living room, and for several minutes he just stares at his hands. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he begins to speak. I listened to all the recordings last night, all of them. My father made hours of testimony, explaining his reasoning, talking about his hopes for me, his disappointment in the man I became. He knew exactly who I was. And he gave me 30 years to prove him wrong. And I spent those 30 years proving him absolutely right. Richard looks up, and I'm shocked to see genuine tears on his face. I could make excuses. I could blame my upbringing or business pressure or society's conditioning. But the truth is simpler and worse. I chose cruelty because it was easier than empathy. I exploited you because I could. And I justified it with racism, so ingrained I didn't even recognize it as a choice. He wipes his eyes roughly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I finally see it. All of it. The decades of microaggressions and wage theft and systematic dehumanization. I see what I did, and I'm horrified by myself. I let the silence stretch, not to be cruel but because I need to sense whether this is genuine or just another manipulation. Finally, I speak. Your father hoped you'd learn these lessons through watching how I was treated. That my dignity under pressure would teach you something about character. Instead, you saw my patience as weakness and exploited it further. Richard nods miserably. I did, and I'm so deeply sorry. Not because I lost the house or the money, but because I spent 30 years becoming exactly the kind of man my father despised. How do I fix this? How do I become better? I stand, walking to the window where William used to stand every morning watching the sunrise. The answer I'm about to give isn't mine alone. It's William's, channeled through 3 decades of his wisdom. You fix it by doing the work, Richard. Real work, not performative kasturs. You honor the settlement terms genuinely, not as punishment but as opportunity. You examine every interaction you have through the lens of power and privilege. You use whatever influence you have left to advocate for people who look like me in situations where they have no voice. And you do it for the rest of your life. Not until you feel you've made up for it, but until it becomes who you are rather than what you're performing. He's nodding, writing notes on his phone like he's documenting a roadmap. Can I ask one more thing? I turn, waiting. The scholarship fund in my father's name. Can I increase it? I know the settlement said 100,000, but I want to make it 500,000, and I want to administer it myself, personally review every application, meet every recipient. I want to see the people I'm helping, understand their struggles, remember why this matters. For the first time since he arrived, I see something in Richard Harper that might actually be redeemable, that would honor your father's memory. And yes, you can do that. He stands to leave, pausing at the door. Clara, for what it's worth, I'm glad you won. I'm glad my father saw your value and protected you. And I'm glad you had the strength to endure until justice came. I don't respond. I just nod, and he leaves, and I'm left standing in my living room feeling something I didn't expect. Hope for him. Hope that even the worst of us can change when forced to confront our own cruelty. The week that follows is a whirlwind of media attention, legal paperwork, and community organizing. The story has gone viral somehow, picked up by local news and then national outlets. Woman inherits mansion after 30-year promise becomes a feel-good headline that obscures the deeper truth of systemic exploitation, but at least it's bringing attention to caregivers' rights and racial justice in employment. I give exactly 2 interviews, both to journalists recommended by Judge Morrison, and in both I'm careful to emphasize that my story isn't unique. Thousands of Black women are exploited in domestic work, healthcare, and service industries every single day. The only difference is I had a benefactor who saw my worth and had the resources to ensure eventual justice. Most women in my situation won't get that lucky. We need legal protections, not fairy tale endings. Sarah has taken leave from her firm to help me establish the Harper Thompson Community Foundation, the legal entity that will manage the house's transformation into a community resource center. Marcus works alongside her, bringing expertise in trust law and nonprofit structures. Judge Morrison has agreed to chair the board of directors, lending credibility and oversight. Eleanor Price volunteers to coordinate community outreach. And dozens of other people, many of whom ignored me for 30 years, are now eager to contribute. The Harper Thompson Community House officially opens 3 months after that October day when everything changed. The mansion has been transformed beautifully, maintaining William's elegant aesthetic while creating functional spaces for community programming. The first floor houses a healthcare clinic, offering free services to uninsured caregivers and domestic workers. The second floor has meeting rooms for support groups, legal clinics, and workforce development programs. The third floor, including my old room where William died and where I endured so much, has been converted into temporary housing for domestic workers escaping abusive employment situations. We can house 6 women at a time, providing safety, legal support, job training, and pathways to independent living. The formal opening ceremony draws hundreds of people. Local politicians giving speeches they don't mean. Community leaders praising work they didn't support. Media capturing images for evening news cycles. But there are also people who matter deeply. Sarah standing beside me, with pride radiating from every pore. Marcus, who's become not just legal counsel but genuine friend. Judge Morrison, whose fierce advocacy has protected this project from a dozen different attacks. Eleanor, who spent 3 months coordinating volunteers with military efficiency. And Richard standing in the back of the crowd, applauding with everyone else but making no move to draw attention to himself. He's kept every promise he made. The scholarship fund is up to $750,000 now, supporting 12 students in healthcare programs. He's completed diversity training and started volunteering at a homeless shelter. He's divested from business practices that exploited vulnerable workers. I don't know if his transformation is permanent or performative, but for now, it's enough that he's trying. As I stand at the podium preparing to speak, I catch sight of William's portrait hanging in the foyer, and I feel his presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Not just justice for me, but transformation for everyone. Not just punishment for Richard, but opportunity for redemption. Not just a house preserved, but a legacy of service continued. I smile at the painted image of the man who changed my life, and then I turn to address the crowd. 6 months after the Harper Thompson Community House opened its doors, I stand in front of the bathroom mirror, getting ready for the annual gala fundraiser, and I barely recognize the woman looking back at me. She's 56 now, gray hair styled elegantly rather than hidden apologetically, wearing a dress that costs what I used to earn in 3 months, standing in a bathroom that belongs to her rather than serving in one owned by someone else. The transformation isn't just external. Something fundamental has shifted in how I carry myself, how I move through the world, how I allow myself to take up space. 30 years of diminishment don't disappear overnight, but they're fading, replaced by something William always saw in me but I'd forgotten how to see in myself: dignity, agency, worth. Sarah knocks on the door, already dressed in her own gown, and when I open it, she just stares for a moment before her eyes fill with tears. "Mom, you're beautiful. Not just tonight, but always. I just wish you'd been able to see it sooner." I pull her close, this daughter who witnessed too much of my suffering but also learned from its strength she'll carry her entire life. "I saw it, baby. I just had to hide it until the right moment." That's what survival sometimes requires. We walk downstairs together, and the house that was once a prison has become a palace of possibility, filled with people whose lives have been changed by what we've built here. The gala is everything Judge Morrison promised it would be. A fundraiser that raises $500,000 in a single night, enough to expand programming for another year and begin exploring satellite locations in other underserved communities. The guest list reads like a who's who of local power, politicians and business leaders and philanthropists who've decided that supporting this cause reflects well on their brands. I'm cynical enough to understand the motivations but pragmatic enough to accept the money regardless of why it's given. What matters is the impact, not the intent. As I move through the crowd, thanking donors and telling abbreviated versions of my story, I'm struck by how many people want to touch the fairy tale, to be adjacent to the viral narrative of patience rewarded and justice served. But every so often I encounter someone who gets it, who understands that my story isn't about luck or magical intervention, but about systemic exploitation that happens every single day to people who won't get fairy tale endings. Those are the conversations that matter. One such conversation happens with a young black woman named Jasmine, who works as a nanny for a wealthy family in the neighborhood. She pulls me aside during cocktail hour, her voice low and urgent. "Miss Thompson, I'm living your story right now. They don't pay me overtime. They ask me to do housework that wasn't in my contract, and when I raise concerns, they remind me how lucky I am to work for such a good family. I don't have a William Harper to save me. What do? I take her hands, and in them I feel my own younger self, frightened and exploited and unsure whether fighting back would make things worse. I give her Sarah's card, explaining the legal clinic we run every Tuesday specifically for domestic workers facing exactly these situations. And then I tell her the truth William taught me. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's inherent, unchangeable, and yours to claim. Don't wait 30 years like I did. Start claiming it now." The evening's keynote speaker is Richard Harper, a choice that surprised many people, including me, when Judge Morrison first suggested it. But she was adamant that redemption requires public accountability, and Richard has earned this platform through 6 months of consistent action rather than empty promises. He takes the stage looking nothing like the arrogant man who tried to evict me, dressed simply rather than ostentatiously, his bearing humble rather than commanding. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. 6 months ago, I stood in this house, this room actually, and learned that my father had left his entire estate to Clara Thompson. My first reaction was outrage. How dare she take what was rightfully mine? How dare my father betray his own blood? But those questions revealed exactly why he made the choice he did. I saw inheritance as a right rather than a gift. I saw Clara as the help rather than as a human being deserving of dignity and compensation. And I saw my father's love and approval as something owed to me, rather than something I needed to earn through my own character and choices. He pauses, visibly emotional, and the room is silent except for the soft clink of glasses being set down as people lean forward to listen. I spent 30 years exploiting Clara's labor, stealing her wages, diminishing her humanity with racial microaggressions I didn't even recognize as cruelty because they were so normalized in how I viewed the world. My father gave me 3 decades to prove him wrong about the man I'd become. And I spent every single one of those years proving him absolutely right. The inheritance I lost was nothing compared to the person I lost, the better version of myself I could have been if I'd chosen empathy over entitlement. Richard looks directly at me then, and I see in his eyes something I never thought I'd witness. Genuine remorse, yes, but also gratitude. "Clara, I can never repay you for what I took, but I can dedicate the rest of my life to ensuring others don't repeat my mistakes." The scholarship fund now supports 18 students. I've divested from business practices that exploit vulnerable workers. I volunteer 20 hours a week with organizations serving communities I once ignored. And every single day, I work to become the man my father hoped I would be. It's not redemption, it's just the beginning of accountability. But it's a beginning I'm committed to for the rest of my life. The applause is thunderous, and I find myself clapping too, moved despite myself by the transformation I've witnessed these past months. After the formal program ends and the gala shifts into mingling and silent auction bidding, I find myself alone for a moment in William's study, now my study, looking at the photograph of him that sits on the desk. He's smiling in that picture, taken maybe a year before we met, healthy and strong and full of the vitality that cancer would steal so quickly. I wonder what he would think of all this. The house transformed into community service. Richard actually trying to change. Me finally claiming the life he wanted me to have. Would he be proud? Would he feel vindicated? Or would he just be satisfied that his complicated, time-delayed plan actually worked? I hear footsteps and turn to find Marcus in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Thought you might need this. It's exhausting being the guest of honor. I accept the glass gratefully, and we toast silently to William's portrait. Marcus and I have become genuine friends these past months, bonding over late-night strategy sessions and shared commitment to the Foundation's mission. He's proven himself worthy of the second chance I offered, working tirelessly, and refusing payment despite my insistence. Tonight he looks contemplative rather than celebratory. Clara, can I ask you something that's been bothering me? How did you do it? How did you endure 30 years of exploitation without breaking, without giving up, without losing yourself entirely to bitterness? I consider the question carefully because it deserves a thoughtful answer. I had 3 things that kept me whole, Marcus. I had William's promise, which gave me hope that justice would eventually come. I had Sarah, my daughter, who reminded me every day why the sacrifice mattered. And I had my faith, not necessarily religious faith, but faith in the fundamental truth that dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. They could exploit my labor and disrespect my humanity, but they couldn't touch the core of who I knew myself to be. That belonged to me alone. Marcus nods slowly, understanding. You're remarkable, you know that? I shake my head. I'm just a woman who kept a promise. But what we're building here, this community house, this is remarkable. This is William's legacy, and mine intertwined, creating something that outlasts both of us. That's what makes the 30 years worth it. The gala winds down after midnight, successful beyond our projections in both funds raised and community engagement generated. Sarah and Judge Morrison are handling the final details. So I slip away to the 3rd floor, to the small room where I lived for 30 years and where William died in my arms. It's been converted into temporary housing now, currently occupied by a Filipina woman named Maria, who's escaping an abusive employer. She's asleep, so I don't disturb her, but I stand in the doorway for a moment, remembering who I was in this space and acknowledging who I've become. The journey from there to here wasn't just about inheriting a house or gaining financial security. It was about reclaiming selfhood after decades of systematic erasure. It was about proving that patience isn't weakness and that justice, even delayed, can still be transformative. And it was about taking pain that could have destroyed me and alchemizing it into purpose that might protect others. I whisper a final thank you to William's ghost, wherever it lingers in these halls, and then I head downstairs to my own bedroom, the master suite that once belonged to him, and I sleep the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who has finally arrived home. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, more women needing help, more systems requiring change, more work than any one person can accomplish. But tonight, I rest in the knowledge that the promise made 30 years ago has been kept, that justice has been served, and that the life William wanted me to have is finally beautifully mine. Have you ever waited for justice? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about courage, justice, and the power of keeping promises. Don't miss our next story. Click the video appearing on your screen now. Drop a comment 30 if you believe that patience and dignity can defeat arrogance. 30 years she waited, and today we honor that unwavering strength and the promise that changed everything.